I wanted to talk a little bit today about kind of where my mind goes with all of the divisiveness and the anger and the fear in this country right now. So I noticed that I'm searching all the time to find some reasonableness and some inclusiveness and some kindness and care. And I came across an article in the New York Times a few weeks ago that I was so happy to see because it really is in alignment with basic Buddhist values, and it's in the mainstream press, so I thought that was pretty wonderful. And it was an article written by an op-ed columnist, David Brooks, who writes for the New York Times, and he titled it "The Power of Altruism." And he begins by reminding us that Western society was built on the assumption that people are fundamentally selfish. And this can be traced back to mostly Hobbes, and he also listed Machiavelli and Sigmund Freud, actually. And he said that Sigmund Freud wrote that children are completely egoistic. So we can see where some of these views come from that are not really so helpful in the society right now. He continued to say that classical economics adopts a model that says people are primarily driven by material self-interest. And we can see that, this whole materialistic society is really driven by that. And also political science assumes that people are driven to maximize their power. And again, we can see how that is influencing our country today. The wonderful thing about his article is he says that this worldview is clearly wrong. And so that's the good news. He says that in real life, the push of selfishness is matched by the pull of empathy and altruism, which of course aligns with our view. And he then starts listing some scientific fact that will support this. He says, as babies, our neural connections are built by love and care. We have evolved to be really good at cooperation and empathy. We are strongly motivated to teach and help others. And then he also cites Mathieu Ricard's book that he wrote recently, I think, called Altruism. And he says, if an 18-month-old child sees a man drop a clothespin, she will move to pick it up and hand it back to him within 5 seconds. At about the same time it takes an adult to offer assistance. Then the interesting thing that he wrote is that if you reward a baby with a gift for being kind, the propensity to help will decrease in some studies by up to 40%. So that's interesting. If you turn help into, kind of a, I'll pay you for doing kindness, then that propensity decreases. What else did he say? Oh, then he just highlighted again that if we build academic disciplines and social institutions upon suppositions of selfishness, we're missing the motivations that drive people much of the time. And worse, if you expect people to be selfish, you can actually crush their tendency to be good. And then he cited another author, Samuel Bowles, who provides a slew of examples from his book called The Moral Economy. He said, he wrote that 6 daycare centers in Israel imposed a fine on parents who were late in picking up their kids at the end of the day. The share of parents who arrived late doubled. Before the fine, picking up their kids on time was an act of being considerate to the teachers. But after the fine, showing up to pick up their kids became an economic transaction. They felt less compunction to be kind. Another example, in 2001, the Boston Fire Commissioner ended his department's policy of unlimited sick days and imposed a limit of 15 per year. Those who exceeded the limit had their pay docked. Suddenly, what had been an ethic to serve the city was replaced by a utilitarian paid arrangement. The number of firefighters who called in sick on Christmas and New Year's increased by tenfold over the previous year. So what he's getting at here is this lens that we can use to see situations. It can be an economic lens or it can be a moral lens. And this just reminded me of the brilliance of the Dalai Lama now, because he is teaching so much about secular ethics, and which gets us to look at things through a moral lens instead of an economic lens. When you introduce a financial incentive, it prompts people to see their situation through the economic lens instead of following their natural bias towards reciprocity, service, cooperation. It encourages people to do a selfish cost-benefit calculation, and they start to ask, what's in it for me? And so here's all this selfish stuff that comes then. And it really feeds the self-centered attitude that we, again, see so much in our political arena right now. And so we often get much worse outcomes. The Dalai Lama often says that love is more natural than hatred, altruism more natural than egoism. Since from birth to death we all need, in order to survive, to give and receive love to accomplish both our own welfare and others. In general, he adds, we feel good when we show kindness to others and bad when we harm others. And we prefer the company of kind people. Even animals move away from someone who is angry, brutal, or unpredictable. According to him, the relationship between kindness and well-being can be explained by the fact that the human being is a social animal who depends closely on mutual aid and kindness, from which we will benefit and which we will in turn show to others. And so then often, the question comes up, well then why so many conflicts and so much violence? And His Holiness explains this, that kindness is an expression of a human being's state of equilibrium, and violence is disequilibrium. And so that brings us then to, of course, we know that hatred causes suffering for both the one who is hated and the one who hates. True for fear, fear also breeds this kind of disequilibrium. And so this brings us back to our practice. Whenever we have any affliction arise in the mind, we are not in equilibrium, we are unbalanced. And so one of the things that we can do to help this world right now, with all of this divisiveness and this separation, is any time that we feel any affliction in the mind, that we apply the antidote immediately, and we are then in that moment bringing ourselves closer to others. We are decreasing this hatred and this divisiveness and this separation between people. And that affects the world, that affects everyone here, that affects further than we even can understand, I think. And so let's set our attention to bring this equilibrium to ourselves, which then in turn brings equilibrium to those around us and to this world for the benefit of everyone.